Suddenly, the trap is sprung.
The Battle of Midway, unfolding from June 4th to 7th, 1942, stands as a monumentally important chapter of World War II's Pacific theatre. This pivotal naval clash, occurring merely 6 months after Japan's audacious strike on Pearl Harbor and following the Battle of the Coral Sea, etched its name in history as a defining moment of military strategy and audacious naval warfare. The strategic value of Midway was so critical in the Japanese military's calculations that it featured in their initial strategy for the Pacific War. This significance was underlined approximately 12 hours after the infamous Pearl Harbor attack, when the Japanese destroyers Sazanami and Ushio launched an offensive against Midway, targeting its power plant and a seaplane hangar on Sand Island. Under the leadership of Admirals Chester W. Nimitz, Frank J. Fletcher, and Raymond A. Spruance, the U.S. Navy staged a remarkable triumph against the Imperial Japanese Navy, commanded by Admirals Isoroku Yamamoto, Chuichi Nagumo, and Nobutake Kondo. This battle, north of Midway Atoll, inflicted catastrophic losses on the Japanese fleet, reshaping the dynamics of naval warfare. Celebrated military historians have lauded it as an unparalleled and decisive strike, comparing its monumental significance to other historic naval battles such as Salamis, Trafalgar, and Tsushima Strait. The Japanese strategy, fueled by a desire for expansion and retaliation for the Doolittle air raid on Tokyo, aimed to establish a formidable defensive perimeter and ensnare American aircraft carriers in a calculated trap. This ambition extended to potential assaults on Midway, Fiji, Samoa, and even Hawaii. However, a blend of miscalculations and American cryptographers' skill in deciphering Japanese plans laid the groundwork for a U.S. counter-strategy that proved to be a masterstroke. The battle saw the engagement of 4 Japanese and 3 American aircraft carriers. In a remarkable turn of events, the Japanese carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, all veterans of the Pearl Harbor attack, met their demise, along with the heavy cruiser Mikuma. The United States, while losing the carrier Yorktown and the destroyer Hamon, emerged from the battle with the Enterprise and Hornet unscathed, a testament to their naval prowess. The human cost was equally staggering, with around 3,000 Japanese sailors and airmen perishing in the battle. The hasty retreat of the Japanese fleet from the battleground further compounded the tragedy, as it limited the chances of rescuing those who were stranded in the water. On the American side, the victory was achieved at a significant cost, though considerably less than that of the Japanese. The US losses included 1 carrier, a destroyer, and nearly 150 aircraft, the majority of which were based on carriers. In terms of human lives, the toll was markedly lower, with 317 American sailors, airmen, and Marines, including those from the Midway garrison, losing their lives. Despite these losses, the Battle of Midway marked a significant turning point in the Pacific theater, altering the balance of naval power in favor of the United States. This defeat in 1942 marked a monumental shift in the Pacific War. For the Allies, the outcome of Midway was not just a tactical triumph, but a strategic masterstroke. Japan's ability to replenish its lost material and personnel dwindled rapidly, starkly contrasting with the United States' burgeoning industrial and training capabilities. Thus, the repercussions of this battle were profound, compelling Japan to abandon its ambitious plans to extend its conquests to New Caledonia, Fiji, and Samoa. Consequently, Japan's earlier strategic momentum in the Pacific was effectively diminished, leaving only a shadow of its former naval dominance. This pivotal battle therefore reshaped the strategic landscape of the Pacific theater, significantly altering the course of the war in favor of the Allies. As such, the Battle of Midway must be placed in the major tier. The D-Day Normandy campaign, initiated on June 6, 1944, was an indispensable operation, reshaping the trajectory of World War II. Born from a strategic decision following America's entry into the war, This operation embodied the Germany First approach. American determination for a direct confrontation culminated in the meticulous planning of Operation Overlord, under the seasoned leadership of Eisenhower, who decisively set the date for the invasion after grappling with adverse weather conditions. The scale of Operation Overlord was extraordinary. More than 5,000 ships and landing crafts set sail from England, supported by an air fleet of over 11,000, marking one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history. The operation began with paratroopers and glider troops landing behind enemy lines in the dark hours before dawn, securing critical bridges and exit roads. As daylight broke, the beaches of Normandy witnessed an unprecedented assault as thousands of Allied troops stormed the coast. The British and Canadians at Gold, Juno, and Sword Beaches, and the Americans at Utah faced varied degrees of resistance, with the American forces at Omaha Beach encountering the fiercest opposition. Despite the heavy resistance, the day's end saw an impressive foothold established on French soil. Approximately 156,000 troops had landed, a testament to the Allies' logistical prowess and determination. However, this victory was not without its cost. More than 4,000 Allied troops laid down their lives, with countless others wounded or missing, encapsulating the brutal nature of the campaign. In the days following, the beachheads were fortified, signaling a relentless march forward by the Allied forces. The Germans, plagued by confusion and leadership gaps, notably Rommel's absence and Hitler's miscalculations, struggled to mount an effective counter-offensive. This disarray among the German ranks was further exacerbated by the formidable Allied air and naval support, which played a crucial role in disrupting German reinforcements and fortifications. As the Allies pushed forward, their momentum was unstoppable. By the end of June, they had seized Cherbourg, a significant logistical victory, bringing in approximately 800,000 men and 150,000 vehicles. This rapid build-up of forces in Normandy not only demonstrated the Allies' logistical supremacy, but also highlighted the diminishing German capacity to replenish their losses. The Normandy campaign had fundamentally altered the balance of power in Western Europe. It can be no surprise, then, that the Normandy campaign finds itself placed in S tier for its critical role in guiding Allied forces to victory in Europe. In the crucible of World War II, the German Wehrmacht, after securing substantial territories in present-day Ukraine and Belarus by the spring of 1942, strategically pivoted to launch an offensive against southern Russia in the ensuing summer. This maneuver was set against a backdrop where the Soviet forces under the iron-fisted leadership of Joseph Stalin had already mounted a formidable defense against a German onslaught aimed at Moscow during the winter of 1941 and 1942. Despite successfully thwarting the German advance, Stalin's Red Army had incurred substantial losses, both in manpower and armament. Anticipating another Nazi offensive targeting Moscow, Stalin and his military coterie, including the future Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev, were caught off guard when Adolf Hitler and the Wehrmacht shifted their focus to Stalingrad. The city of Stalingrad, an industrial hub crucial for its artillery production, and the strategically significant Volga River, serving as a vital conduit between the western and eastern expanses of the country, became the epicenter of Nazi ambition. Hitler's covetous eyes on Stalingrad were not merely for its industrial and strategic value, but also for the potent propaganda victory its capture would represent, given its bearing of Stalin's name. The Soviet resolve to defend Stalingrad was equally intensified by these symbolic stakes. The German declaration that male inhabitants of Stalingrad would be executed and women deported upon its capture set the stage for one of the bloodiest confrontations of the war. Stalin's directive mobilized every able-bodied individual to defend the city, with the 6th Army of the Wehrmacht commencing their assault on August 23, 1942. As the Battle of Stalingrad commenced, Soviet resistance initially stymied the German advances through grueling skirmishes north of the city, despite suffering upwards of 200,000 casualties. The Luftwaffe's aerial dominance rendered the Volga River inoperative for Soviet logistics and inflicted considerable civilian casualties, the exact toll of which remains elusive, but is believed to number in the tens of thousands, with many more subjected to forced labor in German camps. Despite the Luftwaffe's control of the skies, the beleaguered city, under Stalin's uncompromising command of "not a step back," witnessed civilians, including women, pressed into trench building and combat roles. By fall, Stalingrad lay in ruins, with the Soviet forces perilously cornered. The tide began to turn, with Soviet reinforcements bolstering the dwindling numbers in the city, under 20,000 troops and fewer than 100 tanks. As Generals Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky orchestrated a counter-offensive, famously dubbed Operation Uranus. By late November 1942, this counter-offensive successfully encircled nearly 300,000 Axis troops within Stalingrad, an event later immortalized in Soviet propaganda cinema. The encirclement precipitated a dire resource crisis for the trapped German forces, exacerbating their plight in the ensuing Russian winter. As the harsh winter set in, Soviet forces, leveraging their territorial gains in areas like Rostov-on-Don, further strained the Axis powers through Operation Little Saturn, particularly targeting Italian divisions west of Stalingrad. German efforts to extricate their forces faltered, culminating in a refusal by Hitler to surrender, even as his troops faced starvation and ammunition scarcity. By February 1943, the Soviet recapture of Stalingrad was complete, securing nearly 100,000 German prisoners, though sporadic resistance lingered into early March. The aftermath saw most captives succumb to disease or starvation in Soviet captivity. The defeat at Stalingrad, the first publicly acknowledged by Hitler, marked a pivotal shift in the war's trajectory, placing the Axis powers on the defensive and bolstering Soviet morale. Thus, the Battle of Stalingrad stands not merely as a critical battle, but a watershed moment in the annals of modern warfare, indisputably meriting its classification as an S-tier event in the context of World War II. The Battle of Britain, a pivotal and highly significant chapter in the narrative of the Second World War, continues to captivate historians and military enthusiasts alike. This conflict, which unfolded in the skies over England from July to October 1940, transcended beyond mere survival against the formidable Luftwaffe of Nazi Germany. It emerged as a defining juncture that critically influenced the trajectory of the war. Underscoring the battle's strategic significance is essential. In the wake of Germany's swift conquest of France and the Low Countries, Britain emerged as the sole bulwark of resistance against the Nazi onslaught in Western Europe. The genesis of the battle lay in Hitler's ambitious Operation Sea Lion, aimed at an amphibious and airborne invasion of Britain. The Luftwaffe's mission was straightforward yet daunting: achieve air superiority to pave the way for this invasion. Hence, the Battle of Britain was much more than a series of air skirmishes. It was a fundamental blockade, thwarting a potential German invasion, with far-reaching implications for Europe's future. Commanded by Hermann Göring, the Luftwaffe embarked on a campaign initially focusing on British maritime targets, which quickly escalated to intensive bombings of RAF airfields and infrastructure. This aggressive strategy sought to dismantle Britain's air defence capabilities, vital for gaining air dominance. In response, the RAF, led by Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, strategically utilised a network of radar stations and an effective ground-controlled interception system. This integration of technological innovation and strategic foresight was crucial in countering the German advance. The RAF's resilient and tactically adept defence not only demonstrated their bravery, but also reinforced the wisdom of Britain's pre-war air defence strategy. The 1937 policy of Sir Thomas Inskip, emphasising the need for a robust fighter force, was proven prescient. Fighter Command, armed with legendary aircraft like the Supermarine Spitfire and Hawker Hurricane, adeptly challenged the Luftwaffe's offensive, highlighting the paramount role of air superiority in modern military engagements. The scale of the battle was staggering. Despite the Luftwaffe's formidable aerial might and relentless assaults, the RAF's tenacious defense inflicted significant losses on the Germans. While both sides claimed several thousand aircraft kills from July to September, subsequent analyses suggest that these figures were inflated. Nonetheless, the German losses, nearing 2,000 aircraft, were substantial, in stark contrast to the considerably lower losses sustained by the RAF, including those from Bomber Command and Coastal Command. This failure of the Luftwaffe to sustain their daylight bombing campaign marked a crucial strategic error, allowing the RAF to recover and shift the battle's momentum. On the global stage, the Battle of Britain had deep and far-reaching implications. Initially, key figures like the American ambassador Joseph Kennedy harbored doubts about Britain's capability to withstand the German offensive. However, the observations and reports of emissaries like William Donovan and journalist Ralph Ingersoll played an instrumental role in swaying American opinion, paving the way for increased US support and assistance through initiatives like the Lend-Lease program, thus bolstering Britain's war effort. The battle was as much a psychological contest as it was a physical one. The inability of Germany to overpower the RAF and coerce a British capitulation marked Hitler's first significant setback in the war. This outcome shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility, providing a substantial morale boost to the Allies. The psychological resonance of this triumph, both within Britain and internationally, was profound, fueling resistance against Nazi dominance across Europe and bolstering Allied resolve. Moreover, the battle's outcome had enduring consequences on the war's conduct. The Luftwaffe's failure to secure air superiority led Hitler to delay and eventually abandon Operation Sea Lion. This strategic misjudgment not only safeguarded Britain's sovereignty, but also ensured its role as a crucial base for future Allied operations, including the liberation of Western Europe. While it is not categorically certain that Britain would have succumbed completely to Nazi control had the Battle of Britain been lost, the battle's role as one of the first significant Allied victories lands this event in A tier. The Siege of Leningrad during World War II, particularly the Hungry Winter of 1941 to 1942, stands as a stark symbol of human endurance and tragedy. In this period, the city experienced extreme starvation, leading to a death toll of about 100,000 people per month. Residents resorted to eating anything available, including pets and non-food items, and warmth was sought through burning personal belongings. The dire conditions led to widespread theft, murder for ration cards, and over 2,000 arrests for cannibalism. Despite these hardships, Leningrad did not fall to the Nazi siege. In early 1942, around 500,000 civilians were evacuated via the Road of Life across Lake Ladoga, somewhat easing the situation. The city's population was reduced to about 1 million, allowing for a more sustainable existence. Efforts were made to clean the city and plant gardens for food. The siege's turning point came in early 1943 when the Red Army opened a small corridor, allowing for the transportation of nearly 5 million tons of supplies into the city. The population, with a workforce comprising mostly women, revitalized Leningrad's production capabilities. The siege finally ended in January 1944, after 900 days, with the Red Army breaking the blockade, leading to widespread celebration among the survivors. Overall, the siege resulted in the deaths of an estimated 800,000 civilians, a number comparable to the combined World War II military deaths of the United States and the United Kingdom, highlighting its historical significance and human cost. Thus, the survival of the Soviet city, which tied up German supplies on the Eastern Front and frustrated the Third Reich's advance, in addition to the eventual success of the Red Army in breaking German resolve, means this vital battle must be placed in B tier. In the waning days of World War II, the Battle of Berlin, from April 20th to May 2nd, 1945, emerged as a defining chapter in the conflict's closing act. This battle, culminating in the Soviet Red Army's capture of Berlin, was not just a military operation, but a vengeful reprisal for years of suffering inflicted upon the Soviet people since 1941. April 1945 saw the Soviet Union amassing one of history's largest military concentrations outside Berlin. Inside the city, battered by relentless Allied bombings, a hodgepodge of defenders, including stragglers, remnants of defeated units, and young members of the Hitler Youth, some as young as 14, braced for the onslaught. The city, in its final stand, was a shadow of its former self, teeming with refugees and beleaguered citizens. The Soviet marshals, Ivan Konev and Georgy Zhukov, driven by the prestige of capturing Berlin, propelled their troops into a fierce and destructive advance. In just 5 days, their forces encircled the city. The final assault was a barrage of nearly 2 million artillery shells, reducing much of Berlin to rubble and leaving its inhabitants in a state of despair, clinging to fleeting hopes of relief or rumors of an unlikely American alliance against the Soviets. The combat in Berlin was brutal and desperate. The urban landscape offered some tactical advantages to the beleaguered defenders, who, despite their dire situation, mounted a tenacious resistance. However, the Soviets' overwhelming firepower often met even the slightest resistance with disproportionate retaliation, disregarding civilian lives in their quest for control. Amidst this chaos, Adolf Hitler, ensconced in his bunker, deludedly believed in the city's salvation, issuing futile commands to virtually non-existent armies. In stark contrast, Stalin, fixated on seizing the largely symbolic Reichstag building, disregarded its lack of strategic value, a decision that resulted in heavy Soviet casualties. In a city gripped by fear and devastation, many Berliners, desperate for an end to the horror, risked execution by displaying flags of surrender or welcome to the advancing Red Army, acts often ignored by the Soviet troops. The climactic moment came with Hitler's suicide on April 30th, leading to the eventual surrender by General Helmuth Weidling. For the remaining defenders, especially the doomed SS troops, choices were stark: futile resistance, suicide, or surrender. In the aftermath, as Berliners emerged from the ruins, they confronted a city in an uncertain future under Soviet rule. The enormity of the Battle of Berlin's toll was profound, with the Soviet Red Army sustaining approximately 100,000 casualties. In contrast, the exact toll on German forces remains elusive, shrouded in the fog of the war's chaotic end. However, while the fall of Berlin was as symbolic as it was devastating, it did not alter the course of the war, which had already tilted inexorably against the Reich. Thus, we decided to place the Battle of Berlin in the noteworthy category. Okinawa, the largest of the Ryukyu Islands located southwest of Japan, was a paramount strategic island for the Allied forces during World War II. The strategic significance of Okinawa lay in its potential to serve as a base for air operations against Japan and as an advanced naval anchorage. Codenamed Operation Iceberg, the invasion of Okinawa and surrounding islands commenced on April 1, 1945. The initial landings on Okinawa by US Army and Marine Corps forces encountered minimal resistance. However, the Japanese defenders, entrenched and prepared, soon mounted a vigorous and formidable defense. The conflict on Okinawa extended over nearly 3 months, witnessing some of the most intense kamikaze attacks of the war. The human cost of the battle for Okinawa was sobering. American forces endured over 49,000 casualties, including more than 12,500 deaths and missing personnel. The local Okinawan population suffered immensely, with estimates of civilian deaths reaching as high as 150,000. On the Japanese side, around 110,000 troops lost their lives defending the island. Notable episodes during the battle include the valor of Private Desmond Doss, a conscientious objector. The heroism displayed during the battle was profound, with 24 American servicemen receiving the Medal of Honor for their extraordinary bravery. Following the hard-fought American victory, Okinawa served as a critical air base for the final Allied push against Japan. The capture of Okinawa played a significant role in the trajectory towards Japan's surrender, which occurred less than 3 months after the island was secured. Thus, this key moment in the Pacific theater necessitates the Battle for Okinawa to be placed in the significant category. The Battle of Kursk, occurring between July 5th and August 23, 1943, stands as a notable chapter in the war, marking a failed German offensive against the Soviet defenses around Kursk in western Russia. This battle, known for its massive scale, involved a protruding 150-mile Soviet salient that extended 100 miles into German-held territory. The German strategy, aimed at reclaiming the initiative on the Eastern Front, entailed a pincer movement from both the north and south to encircle and annihilate the Soviet forces in the salient. The German attack force was formidable, comprising nearly 900,000 troops within almost 50 divisions, including 17 motorized or armored divisions equipped with around 2,700 tanks and assault guns. However, the Soviets, having anticipated the German assault, strategically repositioned their critical forces out of the salient's most vulnerable areas. When the Germans launched their attack on July 5th, they were met with robust Soviet anti-tank defenses and minefields. The German advance was significantly impeded, achieving only limited territorial gains of 10 miles in the north and 30 miles in the south, and suffered substantial tank losses. At the battle's zenith on July 12th, the Soviets launched a counter-offensive, bolstered by a superior concentration of both troops and tanks. This shift in momentum allowed the Soviets not only to repel the German forces, but also to initiate a broader offensive. This campaign led to the liberation of Orel on August 5th and Kharkov on August 23rd. The Battle of Kursk, distinguished as the largest tank battle in history, involved around 6,000 tanks, 2 million troops, and 4,000 aircraft. This colossal engagement marked the end of Germany's offensive capacity on the Eastern Front, paving the way for the Soviet Union's sweeping offensives in 1944 and 1945. For its sheer size and notoriety, we place this infamous battle in B tier. The Battle of El Alamein, fought in 1942, was a significant moment in World War II, particularly in the North African Campaign. There were 2 battles at El Alamein in 1942. The first, from July 1st to the 27th, ended in a stalemate, while the second, from October 23rd to November 11th, was a decisive Allied victory and marked the beginning of the end for the Axis in North Africa. The second battle was significant for several reasons. Firstly, it was led by British General Bernard Montgomery against the Axis forces commanded by German Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The battle's success was due in part to Montgomery's strategy. He built up his forces, ensuring superior numbers of men, tanks, guns, and aircraft. The British then engaged in a battle of attrition known as crumbling against the Axis forces, wearing them down through brutal close-quarter fighting. The final phase of the battle, Breakout, was fought between November 1st and 4th, where Montgomery, judging Rommel's forces at breaking point, ordered the final blows against them. The Allied victory at El Alamein was crucial as it eliminated the Axis threat to Egypt, the Suez Canal, and the Middle Eastern and Persian oil fields. This victory was the first clear-cut and irreversible victory inflicted by the British Army upon the Axis, coming after years of setbacks. Churchill's remark that before the battle, "We never had a victory, but after we never had a defeat," sums up its importance. Thus, landing this important battle of the African campaign in C tier, the Guadalcanal Campaign, an epic saga of World War II's Pacific theater, unfurled as a dramatic clash between Allied forces and the Empire of Japan from August 7, 1942 to February 9, 1943. Codenamed Operation Watchtower, this was the first significant Allied land offensive against Japan, a bold foray that transformed the dynamics of the Pacific War. On August 7, 1942, US Marines, spearheading the Allied contingent, made their audacious landing on Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and Florida Islands in the southern Solomon Islands. Their aim was strategic, to use these islands, especially Guadalcanal, as springboards to neutralize the formidable Japanese base at Rabaul on New Britain. The Japanese, entrenched on these islands since May 1942, found themselves outnumbered and outflanked, leading to the swift Allied capture of Tulagi, Florida, and the half-built Henderson Field airstrip on Guadalcanal. Caught off guard, the Japanese mounted a fierce series of counterattacks from August to November to reclaim Henderson Field. This period witnessed a maelstrom of combat: 3 significant land battles, 7 major naval confrontations, a mix of nighttime surface clashes and carrier battles, and near-daily air skirmishes. The crescendo of these conflicts was the pivotal naval Battle of Guadalcanal in early November, marking the failure of Japan's final attempt to bombard Henderson Field from the sea and land sufficient forces to recapture it. By December, the Japanese, acknowledging the futility of their efforts, began withdrawing their troops, culminating in a complete evacuation by February 7, 1943. This retreat was safeguarded by the Battle of Rennell Island, the last major naval face-off of the campaign, ensuring a safe passage for the withdrawing Japanese forces. The Guadalcanal Campaign emerged on the heels of the Allies' defensive victories at the Battle of the Coral Sea and Midway. Alongside the battles at Milne Bay and Bunagona, it marked a strategic turning point. The Allies shifted from defense to offense, wresting the initiative from Japan in the Pacific theater. This campaign set the stage for a series of Allied offensives across the Pacific, including the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, the Gilbert and Marshall Islands, the Mariana and Palau Islands, the Philippines, and the Volcano and Ryukyu Islands campaigns, paving the way to Japan's eventual surrender in August 1945. While the battle is often overshadowed by more significant battles, its role in facilitating a momentum shift for the Americans against the Imperial Japanese Army earns the Guadalcanal Campaign a place in the noteworthy tier. The Battle of the Atlantic, spanning the turbulent years from 1939 to 1945, was a protracted struggle that was not merely a series of naval engagements, but a crucial determinant of the war's strategic landscape. At the heart of this battle lay the lifeblood of Great Britain and the Soviet Union, the unceasing flow of essential war materials and civilian supplies across the ocean. Given its geographical reality as an island nation, the United Kingdom's reliance on these transatlantic lifelines was acute, for they were the conduits through which flowed the sinews of war: food, fuel, and munitions. The German naval strategy, centered on the use of U-boats and surface raiders, sought to sever these vital arteries, aiming to bring Britain to its knees by starvation and cripple its capacity to sustain military operations on various fronts. In a strategic countermove, the Allies, marrying naval and air power, developed sophisticated convoy systems to safeguard these merchant vessels, a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability that the dire circumstances of war demanded. Technological innovations and intelligence coups, notably the cracking of the Enigma code, were pivotal in tilting the scales in the Allies' favor. In its essence, the Battle of the Atlantic was a linchpin in the Allied victory in Europe. Because of this, we decided to place this drawn-out battle in the major category. Drawing this video to a close, we'd like to emphasize that this project necessitated a degree of subjectivity and personal opinion, so please let us know if you agree with our rankings in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe to stay tuned for a part 2 for other key battles not listed, such as the Battle of the Bulge, Battle of Leyte Gulf, Operation Torch, and the Battle for Moscow. And as always, thanks for watching today's episode of History of Conflict.